This concludes the opening ceremony, and now we will begin the keynote sessions. I'd like to invite Ben Nelson, CEO of Minerva Project, for keynote speech. He will speak on why learning skills means rethinking learning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time and your attention. And I wanted to take a little bit of a step back today. I think we're going to talk a lot about what AI means for our future, how it impacts the life and the world that we live in. And at the same time, I wanted to talk about the mechanics of what it means for us to rethink the substance of our educational process in the face of AI. Now, why do I say that we need to take a step back? Oftentimes, we make compromises as human beings in society. We see an ideal state, and we realize that that ideal state is impossible for one reason or another. And therefore, we compromise on it. We do things in different ways. But every once in a while, we think about what would need to happen in order for us to achieve that ideal state. What would it look like if we were actually to build the technologies, the processes, to enable something that has never happened before to exist? And in fact, if you look at practically everything that we do in society, the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, the way that we travel, the way that we convene, the language that we speak, all of these aspects of life have been dramatically changed over time because of the way that people thought about what would a better way of producing these various aspects, services, products, etc., and built the technologies that enable them to occur. Except in education. The way we educate people today is effectively the same way that we educated before the invention of the printing press, let alone before the invention of computers, the internet, AI, machine learning. And in fact, if you look at how technology is deployed in education, by and large, it is done to provide the same kind of education you can do without technology. It doesn't actually change the substance of what technology is all about. And so I am here to recruit you. I am here to find individuals who are no longer content with thinking about education in the same way that we've thought about it forever. People who have the vision to understand that the nature of education not only can be different, but in the world of AI must be different. I went through that same process when I built Minerva University on a mistaken assumption. I started working on Minerva in 2010, 14 years ago. And at that time, I was convinced that artificial intelligence was about to make widespread commercial impact within 2 years. My timing was a little bit off. But I decided to build a university that would take advantage of a post-AI world, a world where not just access to information, but access to analysis would be a commodity, where you can actually leverage the machine in order to be able to do the things that took up enormous amounts of time for people, and that you could learn in ways that you couldn't learn before because you were too busy digesting information. Because of the design of that institution, today, Minerva is widely recognized as not only the most innovative university in the world, but by far the most effective. The vast majority, 97% of Minerva students, have paid internships before they even graduate, oftentimes doing the kinds of jobs that people with advanced degrees can't do. The work that we do is widely recognized in the broader world of education. 100% of Minerva graduates who've applied to highly selective graduate programs have been accepted by at least one of those programs. The majority of students who've applied for postgraduate degrees, for example, at Harvard, have been accepted by that institution. Harvard undergraduate doesn't have that kind of success. And perhaps most striking, 12% of Minerva graduates have become founders or co-founders of funded startups. To give you a comparison, at Stanford, that ratio is 0.5%. 24 times the success rate of the most successful traditional university in entrepreneurship, without having an entrepreneurship program. Beyond that, universities around the world are starting to follow in the footsteps of Minerva and reforming their education. Now, why is that? How is it that we've been able to be that successful? This is the secret. Educational programs fail because of two core fallacies. Fallacy number one is that exposure to information equals knowledge. It does not. The fact that I am saying these things to you does not mean that you will know them. In order for you to remember what it is that I am saying, you have to deeply think and struggle with the facts that I'm presenting to you. And you have to make and use associations to remember what it is that I have said by building on things you previously know. Let me give you an example or an exercise. I want you to think back to your own university education. I want you to think about any of your classes. Pick one. Pick one class right now that you took as an undergraduate. And if you are a professor today, pick a class that is not in the subject that you are teaching. Do you have that in mind? Now I'm going to perform a magic trick. The magic trick is that the final exam from that one class is right now underneath your chair. You have to take it out and right now do that exam. Does anybody here get more than an F? Maybe one person. The reality is that 6 months after the administration of a final exam at a university, 90 to 95% of what a student has correctly tested on, they cannot replicate. They have been exposed to knowledge. They haven't retained it. Fallacy number one is that by taking a class, passing an exam, you know something, you do not know it. In order for you to know, you have to be an active participant in your own learning, which rarely happens pedagogically in our educational environment. Fallacy number 2 is that even when you know something, you have learned it. Let me ask you a second question to illustrate this point. I asked you before to think about one class. Now I want you to imagine all of the classes you took. But imagine a different scenario. My magic trick isn't just to give you the exam, it's to enable you to get an A+ on every one of those exams right now. I grant you that ability. Imagine that you could get the top score on every single one of those exams today. Whose life would be different? Anybody's? Would it change your job? Would it change your relationship? Would it change the way you vote? Would it change the policies that you advocate for? Knowledge does not equal learning. The entire thrust of our educational system fails at making sure that you retain knowledge, but even if it were to succeed in doing that, the knowledge in and of itself isn't particularly useful. Why is that? It's because the acquisition and retention of knowledge does not mean that you can actually use it. In order to be able to absorb knowledge, you have to be an active participant in the process. You may have heard of active learning. We developed a unique methodology called fully active learning, which ensures historic levels of increasing in mastery over time. Whereas in every educational program measured historically, you see degradation, you see learning loss over time. Minerva is the only program in history that has shown learning gains over time. But the second is by far the most important, which is that once you acquire those pieces of knowledge, those cognitive tools, those abilities, those skills, you then apply them over and over and over again from one context to another, interweaving the learnings such that they become generalizable in your brain. The reason that it was hard to imagine how knowledge of those courses would impact your lives is because they weren't presented as conglomerations of knowledge that you can then apply in your current situation. All of the success of students in Minerva programs comes from the fact that the entire curriculum demonstrates how to apply what it is that you learn over and over and over and over again until you can apply it in whatever situation you encounter, whether it's on the job, whether it's continuing your education, whether it's starting your own initiative. Now, what does all of this have to do with AI? The reality is that the world that we live in is accelerating at an absurd rate. Just as we heard, what could happen in 24 hours today could have taken centuries in the past. We have not evolved as human beings to be able to live in that fast-paced world. Though AI is a real presence today, though it will become more and more potent over time, we'll be able to create and do more and more tasks. Our human brain, our flesh and blood, runs on the same operating system it has for millennia. Educating us takes time. It takes cycles. And in a world where so much can be automated, where so much can be done, and where our time on this planet is finite, the premium on teaching people how to best leverage those tools becomes crucial. Last night at dinner, we talked about this phenomenon called the 10x engineer. In Silicon Valley, these types of creatures exist. I've hired a few of them in my career. These are individuals who can do the work of 10 engineers. They are worth their weight in gold, extraordinarily important for many successful startups, but they're extraordinarily rare. 2.5 years ago, before the public release of ChatGPT, internally, within OpenAI, ChatGPT was already writing 70% of the code for itself. Engineers were using ChatGPT to eliminate the need to write 70% of the code that they had historically had to write. And that was when 3.5 wasn't even live, let alone 4, let alone what's currently being worked on. But ChatGPT isn't just going to produce more 10x engineers. It is going to produce 10x lawyers. It's going to produce 10x civil servants. It's going to produce 10x authors. And the implications for society is profound. Historically, technological disruptions have generated increased wealth. They have allowed us to substitute our strength, or the strength of animals, with machinery. They've allowed us to become more efficient at calculations, at information generation and storage. But it hasn't yet created. Artificial intelligence creates. And it is a question as to whether or not that creation is going to create the kind of economic opportunity that we have seen in the past from previous technological disruptions. What is not a question is that those individuals who will learn to use those tools are going to be the ones that are going to be successful in society at a time when those who haven't learned how to use them may wind up costing society a great deal. At Minerva, we focus on nurturing critical wisdom for the sake of the world. Wisdom, the ability to apply practical knowledge in a context you've never encountered before, is the thing that in a post-AI world we need humans to do the most. The process of teaching wisdom is synonymous with teaching systematic thinking. And that process is long and it is deep, but it can be done for almost any learner at any stage. And if there's one thing that I want you to leave this conversation with, is to think about what could be with technology as opposed to how technology can incrementally do what we've always done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson, for the enlightening words. I also, as an educator, truly believe that learning is not about knowledge, but it's also about how students actively participate in the class and how we can motivate them. And I think there can be many questions since it sounds a little bit challenging for us. So I'd like to invite Professor Oh Jung-hoon for more in-depth discussion and concrete discussion. We'd like to invite Professor Oh Jung-hoon from the College of Business of KAIST as a moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause. Professor Oh, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And you guys should begin to write the questions at this moment, because there is a higher possibility that you can get picked up. Okay. So. Yesterday, Ben and I was talking about education, AI, and so on. So long time, and probably we might be able to chat all day long. But we have only 20 minutes, so I will just ask quick questions to Ben.
I'll try to give quick answers. That's hard for me.
So before you begin to talk, I asked ChatGPT, is Minerva-style education is useful for AI era? And then also, is it useful for government offices? But the problem is that probably most of the people here who are manager levels or higher manager levels, they cannot go back to university age and go to Minerva for active education, right? So what they have to do?
So it's a really important question and a fascinating thing that we have seen in our journey. At Minerva, we've now designed programs for high school students, for university students, for graduate students, and for working professionals and executives. Now, when we thought initially about the design of our programs, we thought, well, obviously, the biggest impact is going to be the younger you go. High brain plasticity, the ability to establish frameworks that you can then use and leverage over time, more malleability, easy to expose, easy to ground people in various elements. It turns out that when you look at the efficacy on a per-hour basis of our educational programs, the single most effective type of Minerva program wind up being executive education. Kind of fascinating. Now, why is that? We realized over time, as we were educating more and more executives, more and more professional workers, that inherent in a traditional program, as I mentioned before, in Minerva program, is context switching. You introduce an idea, a concept, and then you apply it in context after context after context. When you're young, you need time to experience those contexts. You need to have those contexts oftentimes curated for you. When you've lived a little, like some of us have, those contexts are already there. And what happens with learners in short Minerva programs later on in their careers is that they find the tools to be able to be applied retroactively. They see, oh, if I would have thought about constraint satisfaction, I would have made a much better decision 13 years ago. Oh, if I had various levels of analysis, I could have avoided that problem that I did at work or at home. And so the richness of your experience then automatically gets included into your education. So what does that mean? It means that you're able to have much shorter interventions, not instantaneous, but much shorter, that can provide cognitive tools for even senior employees, senior leaders in organizations, and actually change their behavior. Because they can recontextualize in their brain much faster than learners at the beginning of their journey. And so that's what I would say, which is there are well-designed executive education programs can absolutely generate tremendous impact for employees.
Are you doing some collaboration with this kind of executive education at the moment?
Yeah, we've been doing it for years now. We help many organizations, from corporations to governments to public sector leaders, deal with what we refer to as managing complexity, managing a world that is much more complex. We've been offering a long program, part-time, but for working executives, on decisions analysis. So how to actually take various frameworks of thinking and be better decision makers from that. And we've run that program, my gosh, since 2016 to great success. We've done managing complexity implementation since 2018. And we apply these types of opportunities in a lot of different ways. So for example, we worked with USC's Annenberg School of Communication to create a brand new diversity, equity, and inclusion program where DEI programs were getting absolutely destroyed for being ineffective, which almost all of them are. The program, because it used these principles as opposed to dogma or knowledge exposure, was so successful that USC not only used it for its own graduate students, it used to train the entire executive suite of Microsoft's global communications. Right? And now USC is productizing it and bringing it to other companies to help them understand how to manage in diverse and complex environments.
Very good. So probably NHI should consider that kind of collaboration.
Always happy to help.
Okay. There is another question. So AI is now utilized in everywhere. So probably active learning is a very good tool to cope with the AI era, but probably that could be also challenging to your university because now many universities will be thinking about it, and you might have to innovate again to cope with this kind of competition, right?
I would hope so. We wrote a book a number of years ago, which was effectively a blueprint on how we built Minerva. It was called Building the Intentional University, and I ended the book by making a plea. And the plea started with saying, look, we are here to recruit you, like I said to you today, and we want people to join the Minerva revolution. But what we really want is to inspire other people to come up with an even better model. It is impossible that the first attempt at a fundamental reform of education in more than 100 years, which is ours, got it right on the first try. That can't be true. Right? There must be models that are even better. And since then, we've sold nearly 10,000 copies. The book has been translated into 4 languages, and no one has come up with another model. And so I hope that somebody will. I'm begging that for happen because I would like nothing better than to copy somebody else, right?
Are you interested in involving AI to your active learning process?
Yeah, in fact, it's crucial. Now, why is it crucial? One of the reasons that a Minerva kind of education was so hard to conceive is that the amount of feedback that you need to provide to a learner, especially early on, high school, university, when they don't have those contexts in their own head, was enormous. So to give you some perspective, in our undergraduate program, we track 80 different learning objectives that can be assessed on 60 different combinations of vectors of transfer. It's a little bit technical, but the point is that on every single one of these learning objectives, we look at how consistently a student is able to apply them across 60 different context combinations over years with decay functions built in. In order to be able to do that, you have to give thousands, if not tens of thousands, of feedback points to the learner, right? Because otherwise you can't be fulsome in your analysis of these things. That cannot happen without AI. So up until now, we've been doing approximations of it, right? We've been doing things saying, oh, well, you know, you're covered this combination of transfer matrices well, and these cluster of areas suggest that you'll do others because we see correlations and things like that. But as technology and AI improves, it's not there quite yet, but as it improves, we'll then be able to deploy it fully to change the nature of the feedback that students are getting. And when we do that, the full promise of a Minerva education can actually be realized.
I would propose to utilize AI by students in the process of learning. That could be also useful. Are you doing something similar to that?
Yeah, oh, well, that's enormously so. So again, I mentioned that when I designed Minerva, I assumed AI would be commercially viable in 2 years, and it was not. And so what happened was we designed an educational program that doesn't teach any of the foundational subjects. We just said, oh, AI will be able to teach it better than a human can, so students should just learn that on their own with an AI tutor, effectively, and then we'll go on to do a Minerva education. The only minor problem is over the last 10 years, AI tutors didn't exist. And so our students had to learn all of that stuff on their own without any assistance. And I was not their favorite person in the world because they wound up working absurd amounts to make up for the fact that technology wasn't there. Finally, over the last year and a half, Minerva students all of a sudden realized, hey, my education is actually manageable. And that's because AI has effectively enabled them to absorb the information before their active learning at Minerva much more easily.
Yeah. I think in the future, everybody needs their own AI customized for themselves. So probably I would expect that all the students should prepare their own AI before they graduated from university.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. So we will now get questions from the audience. Is there anybody who wants to ask questions to Ben? 한국말로 하셔도 됩니다. 자.
Over there?
Okay.
네, 안녕하세요. 그 질문이 있는데 AI를 잘 활용하는 하급 직원이 있고 위에 이제 보고하는 상사가 있을 때
잠깐만요. 저기 그 동시 통역을 끼신 다음에 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 네, 질문하십시오.
네, 그 AI를 이제 일할 때 활용을 할 때 하급 직원이 이제 그거를 잘 활용을 해서 이제 상사에게 보고를 하는 게 이제 공공기관에서 이제 일 처리 방식이긴 한데 상사가 이제 그것을 선택하지 않을 때에 그 이제 객관성이나 이제 좋은 올바른 결정을 하는 데 있어서는 사람이 계속 필요하긴 할 것이라고 보고 있는데요. 제가 여쭤보고 싶은 거는 결국은 올바른 그리고 다수에게 이익이 가는 그리고 맥락적으로 좋은 판단을 내릴 수 있도록 하는데 좀 사람과 기술이 어떻게 잘 활용하면 좋을지 알고 싶어서 질문드렸습니다.
That's a very profound question, and it is a real danger in the age of AI. Predicting where the future will wind up is a folly. It's too hard to do. But it is worth looking at examples from the past. And one example from the past happened about 25 years ago was the birth of Google and search. Now, you could be forgiven if in 1998, when Google was started, and the concept of search existed before Google, but the elegance and effectiveness of search did not exist really until Google. And when Google came out and they said, we're going to organize the world's information, it would have been a perfectly reasonable assumption to think that in the future, today, what Google would do would serve as an extraordinarily good editor and would take care of all of the selection and editorial tasks that have been reserved to humans, such that humans would be able to elevate their editorial prowess or chops and provide truly great recommendations, and that the best editors, though they would probably be fewer in number, would be far more skilled than they were in the past. What has happened? The exact opposite. It is true there are fewer editors today than there were in the past. It is true that you select information, or you go to people to select information less, but Google is an average, above average selector of information, editor, mediator. And the rest of the world that used to be in charge of editorial content, our newspapers, our televisions, they've dumbed down. Rather than elevating, they're chasing a lowest common denominator. Why? Because Google has conditioned human beings that mediocre is perfectly fine. And we've lost some of our ability to discern, to be able to distinguish between what is fine or acceptable and great when we make choices on what content to consume and what to trust. AI has the potential to do the same thing for creation. And that's very dangerous, I think. Sure. Right? And so one of the things that we need to get right, I'm not quite sure if it's an answer to your question as opposed to a warning, that if we don't figure out the balance between true expertise and machine-generated answers, then we are at risk of descending to a lowest common denominator, not just on the frivolous, but on the things that actually matter. And that's very dangerous for society.
네, 그러니까 결국 중요한 일은 결국은 사람이 해야 된다는 거. The important thing should be done by human. 예, 감사합니다. 뭐 시간이 됐기 때문에 오늘 여기까지 하고 오늘 저기 좋은 강연과 대답해 주신 우리 벤 존슨 씨에게 다시 한번 큰 박수 해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Oh and Mr. Nelson, for the insightful presentation and discussions. Okay, so now this concludes the keynote session, and we will take a 10-minute break to rearrange for the session. We will have a break time of 10 minutes, and we will meet you again at 2:50. Enjoy your break, and see you soon.